Demo discs are a concept that was truly ahead of its time. A disc that held various demos for upcoming games, all in one package, of your choosing. Games that allow the player to get a taste of what is yet to come, picking favorites that capture their interest, that they knew they'd be receiving their allowance money for as a kid, growing up in the 90s. It was one of the coolest and most ingenious ways to capture the consumer's interest to experience various genres of games that introduce someone to something new that they may have never heard of before. But on one fateful night, one out of many of these games that you're introduced to just so happens to be this title called Silent Hill, one of the most unforgettable and most important survival horror games in history. It did so many new things that were unheard of at the time that you can't help but just be amazed at what it accomplished. Back then, imagine many people discovered this game one day by just scrolling down the aisle at your local Toys R Us, Circuit City, or Blockbuster, only to discover this game by chance. But there are also those few who discovered Silent Hill through a demo disc, which is what today's topic of discussion will be about. Today, I'll be looking at 4 rare demo discs of Silent Hill, the USA, Europe, and Japan versions that are specific to the region. There are differences between all these versions, with the changes in the details being very minor and requiring the utmost attention to compare side by side. I'll be evaluating all these notable differences I could discover and talk about the interesting changes between each version with censored content, missing audio, or replaced features missing from the final version. The earliest demo disc the USA received of Silent Hill was a build from 1998, with the release of the official US PlayStation Magazine number 16, January 1999. While it was released in January 1999, it's important to note that the actual build in which the demo was completed was on October 10, 1998. The second released US demo disc of Silent Hill is called Silent Hill Demo CD, released on January 16, 1999. For the sake of confusion, we'll be calling them Demo 98 and Demo 99. Starting the demo brings you a very cozy and chill drive-in theater featuring 16 demos. When selecting Silent Hill, it features a control scheme, allowing the player to familiarize the controls before starting. When booting into the game, we get the title screen with Silent Hill and the trial version underneath in a small font. We have the option to select Scene 1, Scene 2, or Option. The option is drastically different as it lacks Harry's render model that you typically find accompanied by a black background. Here, we have a blue hue on the top and bottom, along with a ton of customability to the options. However, only 4 of the highlighted options are accessible, while the options in the blue font are inaccessible. Scene 1 is the introduction of the game, where we see Harry awaken from his car crash, landing him in Old Silent Hill. While in gameplay, where Harry tries to find Cheryl, there is no audio recording of the voice actor for Harry while the text shows. It is only accompanied by the ambience. When it switches to the FMV cutscene with the zoom in on Cheryl, it plays a jingle sound, which is never in the final version. While following Cheryl, we have a slight pause which shifts the camera angle towards Cheryl running into the back alley. Typically, this has an overhead aerial shot facing down on Harry in the final version. As you enter the back alley, the corpse lying on the ground is non-interactable, lacking any text dialogue from Harry where he typically gives comments when interacting with objects in the environment. This is also seen in the nightmare sequence as you cannot get a comment from Harry when you try to interact with the objects. In the cutscene with Sybil Bennett, it too lacks any dialogue from the voice actors, instead showing the text on the screen of their dialogue. When picking up the knife, this is typically seen as the kitchen knife. However, in Demo 98, it is referred to as the petty knife. One very huge difference is the map you pick up on the counter. It's missable, but when you take a glance and speculate it, it lacks a lot of detail which is seen missing from the map in the final version. Also, Bachman Street is referred to as Pullman Street. When getting the radio and encountering the air screamer, Scene 1 ends with a "coming soon" at the end, featuring Dahlia Gillespie in the background. Scene 2 features the sections of Midwich Elementary School and Nightmare School. You essentially do the same process as you would in the final version of the game, solving the puzzles to unlock the medallions to enter the Nightmare School, and find a way out to escape, which is where Scene 2 would end. When you first encounter the Grey Child, they lack audio when approaching Harry, as they would make a laughing sound when in your area to alert you. In the front lobby, there's a book of images sitting on the counter with blood. It's very minor, but the picture on the bottom of two men in suits is changed in the final version to a waterfall. When picking up the chemical on the shelf, it has the background to accompany the item. This would be later cut in the final version. The larval stalker you'd find running and tripping in the hallways is instead replaced by the creepers. Last but not least, the skull map, much like the Silent Hill map you'd find in Cafe 5-2, is missing lots of details in its presentation. The second demo disc from January 1999, formerly known as Silent Hill Demo CD, is the last demo the US received to the public. It features many other previously seen elements in the previous demo disc, albeit with minor differences that are more so improvements to the overall details in its presentation. While on the topic of the demo disc, I was curious and found an auction of the Silent Hill Demo CD only available on Mercari for $300. It still goes to show how rare and valuable these early versions truly are. Before entering the main menu on Demo 99, you get a lengthy disclaimer explaining to the player that this demo is aimed at a general audience, with mature themes and graphic violence. Konami also wishes the player they enjoy what they have to present in this demo. When in the main menu, Scene 1 and Scene 2 now have been changed to Opening and Battle. In the Options menu, we see a significant change in the background, now having Harry Mason's render, and the UI contains only 4 options this time around. The opening of Harry now features his dialogue, speaking along with the text as he normally does.
Cheryl? Is that Cheryl? Where are you going? Hey, wait! Stop!
This also includes the overhead aerial shot of Harry before entering the back alley to chase after Cheryl. Missing from the previous demo disc was the interactable environment, whereas now we see Harry has dialogue when he interacts with objects in the environment. The cutscene of Sybil Bennett now contains the previously seen missing dialogue, which has now been implemented.
Like I've been run over by a truck. But I'm alright, I guess.
Glad to hear it. You from around here? Why don't you tell me what happened?
Wait a second, I'm just a tourist. I came here for a vacation. I just got here.
The knife you'd find resting on the counter has now been changed to kitchen knife, possibly changed due to the player thinking the petty knife is a useless weapon without much durability to last them, such as when using it in combat. The map for Old Silent Hill has now been updated to contain more details in its presentation, along with fixing Pullman Street to now being changed to Backman Street. The notepad to save is still missing, however, but it's most likely due to this being a demo, which isn't necessary. The battle mode features once again the previously seen Midwich Elementary School and the Nightmare School. However, there are minor differences. When the Grey Children take damage, they now spill out green blood instead of red blood. The same is also applied to Harry when he takes damage. When picking up the chemical, it removes the previously seen background with now just the item. The larval stalker is now implemented in Demo 99, removing the creepers previously seen in Demo 98. The map is slightly updated to closely resemble the final version, although it's still missing important details such as the locations of each classroom. For the Silent Hill Japan trial version and the Silent Hill Europe playable demo, I, unfortunately, didn't find many differences compared to the North American version, although I did find minor details that are still different. The main menu for the Japan demo disc, known as Tekkenban, features a different logo compared to the North American version. It has a light green hue as the drop shadow, along with a dark background. Very minor, but the option menu has a gray overlay over the options for the UI. There's also a Japanese text at the bottom that I, unfortunately, cannot understand as I don't speak Japanese. If someone in the comments section could let me know what it means, I'd greatly appreciate it. The biggest difference in the Takiban demo is in the battle mode. In the battle mode, they changed the Grey Child, which is now replaced by the Mumbler, an enemy that is typically seen later on in Annie's bar at the Silent Hill Resort area and the sewers. Interestingly enough, the Mumblers replaced the Grey Child entirely in both the Japanese and European versions, because the Grey Child failed to pass censorship as they resembled real-life children due to their design. The biggest issue is that the player has to kill these childlike creatures while in gameplay. If we take a look at the beta model of the Grey Child, it originally looks much more human-like in its appearance. Other than that, that's pretty much all I could find with these early versions of Silent Hill. While the differences found in these regional versions of Silent Hill are very minor compared to the final version, it's still really cool and fascinating to see the subtle differences that you wouldn't come to find unless you compare the early versions and the final version side by side. You wouldn't typically come to realize the existence of these early versions until the birth of the internet and the creation of forums on the subject of Silent Hill back in the early 2000s. Nowadays, it's quite a novelty to experience these versions. If anything, emulate that feeling of having a demo disc from back then. There comes a time when a video game enters the early stages of production, planning and mapping out the general idea of what the game would eventually come to be. However, sometimes these ideas are changed late during development and completely differ from the original vision. If not changed, then it is scrapped and cancelled completely. This also happens to coincide with the Silent Hill franchise. Behind the scenes, there have been many games that have been cancelled and lost to time. Let's start from the early beginning. Back in 2004, after the release of Silent Hill 4: The Room, Masashi Sumbayama, the director and designer of formerly Team Silent, would announce the development had begun on Silent Hill 5. Initially, rumors about Silent Hill 5 would be addressed as quote-unquote shadows, but Sumbayama would deny these rumors as mere speculation. In an interview with GameWorld, Imamura said he and the team wanted a strong 5th installment because of the underwhelming response to Silent Hill 4. Silent Hill 4 would meet mixed reception due to not following the same gameplay style as prior entries. This would inspire the team to double down and focus on less melee combat and a more dramatic otherworld that takes advantage of PlayStation 3 generation consoles. In the same interview, Akira Yamaoka, series composer, stated that the plot of Silent Hill 5 would have focused on a damaged human being, summoned to Silent Hill, Maine, for a specific reason. Described as the, quote, darkest story we have come up with, Imamura would add to this darker theme by stating some things would have to be cut to get past the rating system. As opposed to the previous games in the series, Silent Hill 5 would have started in Silent Hill as an everyday town with people going about their daily lives, which would slowly rot away as the game progresses. This would incorporate a real-time gameplay mechanic that Team Silent would deem as daylight horror, through a creepy sunny otherworld, playing with this idea of how light interacts with darkness rather than the previously seen horror element of the fog the series is known for. Silent Hill 5 would have involved members of Team Silent, including Masashi Sumbayama, Akihiro Imamura, and Akira Yamaoka. Oddly enough, Konami ordered Team Silent to develop a game with a similar design to Grand Theft Auto. This, however, would fall through and be cancelled in 2006. Masahiro Ito, the lead art director, clarified that the project was not a horror title and did not include monsters or creatures. At this point in time, Ito became exhausted of horror after his extensive work on the second and third Silent Hill games, and left Konami in March 2006. Originally, Silent Hill Origins was supposed to be held in development by a Climax Studios branch in Los Angeles, California. At one point, Silent Hill Origins was supposed to be a remake of Silent Hill, exclusively to only the PSP. However, the developers would be honest and not know what they were doing, and would feel like it would be ill-advised to proceed with remaking the first game, especially with how much work they realized it would take from the ground up, so they decided to make something new. This led to Silent Hill Origins, a prequel to Silent Hill. The early prototype version of Silent Hill Origins shows a completely different gameplay style than the final release. This featured a departure from the dynamic third-person view to rather focus on the Resident Evil 4 style camera angle and action-oriented combat scene and gameplay. Travis had 6 weapons, divided equally between melee weapons and firearms. Additional changes included a laser sight for his pistol and an option for the player to barricade areas. As Travis would roam the town of Silent Hill, he would fight monsters known as the Afflicted. This prototype version also featured a gameplay section in an asylum with the combat seen previously. However, this early prototype version of Silent Hill Origins would fall through as issues of the game's engine and confusion with the overall direction of the game led to Climax Studios shutting down their Los Angeles branch and transferring the game's team to the Climax Studios branch in Portsmouth, United Kingdom, leading to this cancellation of this early iteration of Silent Hill Origins. In 2006, Climax Studios began working on a pitch for a PlayStation 3 exclusive Silent Hill game known as Broken Covenant. The plot would have focused on Alessa Gillespie's influence spreading outside of the town of Silent Hill, Maine, with the protagonist, Father Hector Santos, traveling from El Paso, Texas, to Arizona to help his niece Anna. In a gameplay demo presentation for Broken Covenant, we see the player model of Travis Grady to showcase the demo. In this demo, we see one of the unique gameplay features of the Arizona town beginning to change and shift at different time intervals, as it slowly becomes corrupted by Alessa's memories. Silent Hill locations from different periods throughout its history would become a physical manifestation and materialize across the American Southwest. Members of the cult, the Order, had relocated to Arizona, operating in an abandoned military base outside of Coyote Flats, believing that Anna was the next Alessa. One of Father Santos' main gameplay mechanics would be the ability to perform holy rituals, with water as one of the key items to purify environments. Creatures would have included demon nurses, miners, mumblers, cockroaches, moths, bees, and at one point even Pyramid Head. Gameplay elements in the pitch included puzzles, stealth, over-the-shoulder camera angles, action sequences, and vehicle exploration. However, Konami later rejected the pitch. In 2006, WayForward Technologies initially developed a pitch demo of a Silent Hill title for the Nintendo DS. In a Twitch livestream, they presented a one-room tech demo using assets from Silent Hill 2. Most notably, James Sunderland is the basis for showcasing the gameplay mechanics, the environment, and the overall presentation of Silent Hill. Looking at the gameplay would see the player moving and interacting with the environment on the top half of the DS screen, while the bottom half would feature the inventory screen. Although the pitch failed to get Konami's attention, Konami later approached WayForward to develop a portable Silent Hill for the PlayStation Vita. This would be Silent Hill Book of Memories. While on the topic of the Nintendo DS, Dementium the Ward was originally pitched as a Silent Hill game for the DS by now defunct developer Renegade Kid. In an interview with IGN, Renegade Kid co-founder Jules Watchem states that while Konami rejected this pitch, Konami wasn't entirely dismissive of the idea they had envisioned for the concept of a Silent Hill on the DS, but rather, Konami thought it was a bad business decision to have a horror game on the DS at the time. There are images of this pitch demo showing a player character, seemingly a SWAT member, holding a nightstick as a weapon while roaming an asylum with various prisoners strapped to a bed. Silent Hill Cold Heart was a pitch for a new Silent Hill game to be released for the Wii in 2007. Developed by the aforementioned Climax Studios. In 2014, the pitch document containing an informational booklet consisting of 7 pages was leaked online. In this document, we see the introduction, gameplay features, puzzle examples, and technical features. The introduction would see the story centered around an emotionally unstable college student, Jessica Chambers. Jessica struggled with nightmares and insomnia, leading her to start speaking to a psychiatrist. However, this would still result in her emotional distress and turmoil. After running out of options, she decides to visit her parents to clear her head. While traveling, she becomes lost in a harsh blizzard and decides to follow an ambulance closely, which eventually brings her to Silent Hill. While here, she would experience the psychological nature of the town, harboring physical manifestations of her inner fears and nightmares. There are sections in this document containing gameplay features, demonstrating the Wii's motion controls that would see a use of the flashlight, realistic melee combat, and an interactable environment. The Frozen Otherworld is a hostile environment containing dynamic transitions with a theme of a blizzard-like setting. The gameplay would heavily capitalize on the psychological horror aspects with the use of psych profiling, tracking the player's every move. This psychological profile would influence later events within the game. Nintendo Wi-Fi connection would be used to report real-world weather and used for dramatic effect during gameplay. Jessica's cell phone would see her contacted by friends or foes. The Wiimote would play audio from its speaker to simulate that of an actual cell phone. Monsters would be alerted by Jessica's cell phone, as it would radiate sound when monsters are nearby. Character customization would also be a fundamental gameplay feature that would allow the player to adapt to the harsh weather environment through survival, such as clothing, food, drinks, barricading, etc. There's also a section dedicated to a walkthrough of exploration and combat for a level within the game called The Lake, suggesting that a build for this level could have existed. While these ideas all sound very ambitious and conceptually a great premise for a game in the Silent Hill series, it's possible Climax Studios overestimated the technology of the Wii with its limitations. This led to the cancellation of Silent Hill Cold Heart. However, this would later be repurposed for the release of Silent Hill Shattered Memories, notably reprising gameplay elements such as the frozen otherworld, interactable environments, and using a flashlight and cell phone. In 2006, Silicon Knights developed a pitch for a Silent Hill game titled The Box for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, dubbed an open world, third-person survival horror experience. At some point, the project was abandoned by Sega and later picked up by THQ and renamed The Ritualist. However, due to financial difficulties at THQ in 2009, the game never materialized and was cancelled. There are some concept images of the box art, main menu, customization settings, different bird species, and finally, hatchets. In 2013, Masahiro Ito was involved in a cancelled Silent Hill title. Due to non-disclosure agreements, information about the development detailing the game is limited. He describes the project as a direct sequel, similar to the likes of Silent Hill 3 to Silent Hill 1. Because of Pyramid Head's popularity as a mascot figure for the Silent Hill franchise, Konami would commission Masahiro Ito to reuse Pyramid Head, much to his disliking of reusing Pyramid Head. He explains he designed Pyramid Head specifically as a manifestation of James Sunderland's inner psyche, becoming displeased with Pyramid Head in later entries. Masahiro Ito states that if Pyramid Head were to be used, Ito wanted him to have an impressive new direction that players would accept. He would design brand new iterations of Valtiel and Pyramid Head that were distinct from what we have seen previously in Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. He intended for Valtiel to kill Pyramid Head in the game's opening cutscene. Concept art would see the opening cutscene depict a baby carriage on a bridge in the Otherworld. However, this untitled Silent Hill sequel would later be cancelled. In 2017, when asked if he would be willing to return to make a feature Silent Hill installment, Masahiro Ito stated that he would be willing to make a new Silent Hill if Pyramid Head is not in it or can be killed early in the game, and if it is not a direct sequel to an earlier installment. I can't help but question, what if these games came to fruition and materialized? Would they have become a commercial and financial success that met the players' expectations, or a complete failure that meets mediocrity and negative reception? The answer, we will never know. But what we do know is that, at the very least, we have documentation of the existence of these cancelled Silent Hill games. It truly is a shame that Konami would reject most of these pitched projects, as they sounded to have lots of potential for such creative innovation to the formula, which would have given a refreshing change of pace. But instead of staying stuck in the past, all we can do is keep moving forward. It's a mystery to this day as to what could have been the sequel that was Team Silent's Silent Hill 5. There is not too much information regarding the original development and plans that Team Silent had in mind, albeit with a couple of interviews with Akihiro Imamura and Akira Yamaoka. According to them, Team Silent's original direction of Silent Hill 5 wanted to incorporate a true return to their psychological horror gameplay roots, yet capture a different atmosphere. That would be a departure from the foggy town you roam and explore in. Rather, the idea was to explore the town of Silent Hill as the everyday person, in a bright, sunny environment. However, the more you stay in the town, the more it slowly deteriorates over time. As Akihiro Imamura puts it, ever since the pre-production of Silent Hill 2, we wanted to start a Silent Hill in a normal environment. Daylight, people going about their business, just normality. What happens when you make that normality rot all around you? Is it possible to make a normal sunny day really creepy? A concept that was undoubtedly bold and ambitious for the series. but nevertheless, an idea worth seeing through. However, any relevancy or known information regarding this Silent Hill 5 that Team Silent would have developed would be lost and cancelled. Team Silent would disband, and eventually, Konami would give the rights of the Silent Hill franchise to Western developers. Even though Silent Hill 5 was initially scrapped, these original plans would later be repurposed for the eventual release of Silent Hill Homecoming. Silent Hill Homecoming has been widely known to have a mixed reception from many fans and players alike, with its questionable gameplay mechanics, inconsistencies in the lore of Silent Hill, and bug/issues. This is nothing new. However, what isn't widely known is that Silent Hill Homecoming was initially, at one point, supposed to be repurposed as Silent Hill 5. At E3 2007, there was a small teaser trailer showing the aforementioned cloudy fog. That was a narration from Alex Shepard, the main protagonist of Silent Hill Homecoming. However, it's very noticeable that there is a different voice actor here instead of Brain Bloom, the voice of Alex Shepard. In this teaser trailer, the narrator can be heard saying the following: "They say war is hell, but there are worse things. War changes you, and nobody back home could ever understand. They never understood me. They say you can't go home again, but they're wrong. I just don't want to." After the narration, it then fades to the Halo of the Sun logo, with a title that states Silent Hill 5. After this teaser trailer, any further mention of Silent Hill 5 is also seen in game magazine articles, such as Eurogamer, where it further elaborates on the plot, the horror atmosphere, and the gameplay that is a noticeable departure from the previous entries. However, the main topic of interest that captured my attention concerning Double Helix's early iteration of Silent Hill 5 is their early concept artwork. To be more specific, user interface and identity design. In these early artworks of Silent Hill 5, we can find lots of concept art of different ideas of how the main menu, the pause menu, and the inventory system would have possibly looked like. For starters, the main menu design looks very ominous and mysterious, having images that show faces that are obscured and hard to see, possibly that of Alex Shepard. We also see two logos, Silent Hill Flesh plus Blood, and Silent Hill 5. The next image shows a close-up of the aforementioned faces, with a better look at their detail, along with the Silent Hill Flesh plus Blood logo. This image shows a hospital room with maggots and flies shown all over the image of a red hue in the background. We also get the text that reads, Combat Difficulty Nightmare, Puzzle Difficulty Detective, and Start New Game. We also get the same image once again, albeit with a better look at the hospital room, without the emphasis on red and the insects on the screen. Seemingly, we once again get the same image of the hospital room from before, although this time it is torn from the bottom half, now featuring a compilation of images that are hard to decipher and make out, as it is blurred or layered over each other. However, we can see the same difficulty options, the name Patient 7, and what appears to be a woman with bloodstains and a stitched mouth on the right of the image. In this image, we see a dark and foggy landscape that is possibly in a forest setting, with the most notable quality being the silhouette of a tree that outlines the dark figure of a woman in the middle. A nice attention to detail is the bottom half of the image, which shows dark crimson veins that are supposed to be roots of the tree. The tree seems to be a recurring theme throughout these concept art images, as it appears consecutively, such as in this artwork with the same idea, although the tree is red and looks more normal. The background appears to be in a dark room, possibly an insane asylum, with creepy looking doll-like figures on both sides of the image. Silent Hill, Flesh plus Blood is once again seen as the title. This image shows a better look at the woman above with stitches across her mouth and bloodstains on her skin. The top right of the image shows another woman with dark black hair with her face obscured. The top left of the image shows an apartment building with a children's slide. The Silent Hill Flesh plus Blood logo has a different design this time. Next is the user interface, more specifically the in-game UI design, which would associate Alex Shepard's health bar and inventory while in combat. The first image shows Alex Shepard with the knife he carries as his main melee weapon throughout the game, standing in the foggy setting that appears to be a cemetery. We see assumingly his health bar on the left. Interestingly, we see more variations of this health gauge. The top half has the same health gauge meter design, although the red appears to have different styles. The bottom half shows seemingly a heart that shows red veins filling the gauge. Finally, we have a couple more designs of the health bar, although this time it has more of a minimalist design. Up next is the weapon wheel. This design shows black silhouettes of Alex's firearms and melee weapons that allows you the option to set your favorite with the A button. To the right, it shows scissors and a health pack. Finally, The bottom left shows the quantity of ammo that is left for the said weapon of your choosing. The next image shows the same silhouettes of the items, although the weapon wheel is gone and instead on the top center of the screen. It also displays the message, "Press like crazy" with the A button, with messages on the bottom that possibly would have been a tutorial for how the inventory system works. The next image shows a better look at the weapon wheel, with images that display Alex's weapons, such as the handgun, combat knife, shotgun, and pipe. The scissors and health pack are also present in the weapon wheel. The following concept images are the same UI interface of the inventory screen, although it has different shades of light that highlight the items to indicate to the player the items they have in their inventory, as well as bloodstains, seemingly with the same purpose. The next design shows a different style of the weapon wheel, this time with the tree in the middle seen previously and the halo of the sun in the background with the color red. Once again, the health items are now grouped with the weapons. The same design is seen once again, although the colors are inverted and instead black and white. This design shows Alex in what appears to be the attic of the Shepherd estate. The weapon wheel has a different style with a cracked screen that sections off each item. The same design can be seen here, although the weapons are more emphasized to the player. The next design is relatively the same, but the halo of the sun makes an appearance once again as the background, along with the color red being prevalent once again. We have our first look at what potentially could have been the pause menu screen. What stands out to me the most is the ability to restart the mission, as I previously don't recall any Silent Hill game before Homecoming to incorporate such an option. We have another design for the inventory, this time for miscellaneous items that could potentially be for puzzles. We see a lamp, a doll, a notebook, a key, and barbed wire. And finally, we have different designs of the logo. What seems to be prominent amongst all of the logo designs for Silent Hill 5 is specifically the Roman numeral for 5 itself. Regarding any other early concept art, information, or really anything I could find for Silent Hill 5, the trail goes cold and ends here. As we all know, at some point during development, Double Helix would shift from the title of Silent Hill 5 and undergo the official title, Silent Hill Homecoming. One thing I find interesting to know is what Kenzie Lamar, lead artist for Monster and character designer, has to say regarding the cancellation of Silent Hill 5 and the shift to instead make Silent Hill Homecoming. He states the following: "Just remember and never forget that if you don't like the direction where Silent Hill went, the only people you can blame are Konami themselves. They are the ones who canned Team Silent and wanted someone else to make the games, and Konami wanted the games to be different. That's why Team Silent was disbanded. They have been losing faith in the franchise for years, and to further prove what I'm saying, they made an arcade-style Silent Hill shoot-'em-up gun game. How Silent Hill is that?" Kenzie Lamar proceeds to add on to this statement, saying, "I just wish they had given the American team the game before they decided to change everything. Most people just assumed the American team was to blame for all the changes, when the reality is that it was Konami who wanted the changes. Team Silent was making a Silent Hill 5, and it got canned in favor of what ended up being done." While the possibility of seeing a Silent Hill 5 is inevitable, considering that the revival of the Silent Hill franchise is present, it leads to the question of not if we will see a Silent Hill 5, rather when we will see the eventual release of a true Silent Hill 5. And if Konami will be able to deliver such an ambitious title with whomever is behind development, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Silent Hill is a franchise that has many layers of depth to its formula. The narrative that gives this emotional storytelling, an atmosphere that can shift from a disturbing other world to then a dreamlike world covered in fog, the symbolism that gives this meaning to the lore behind it. Many creative liberties contribute to this overall experience for the player. However, one thing that I don't find many people talk too much about is the unused content behind the development of many of these games. So, I figured I'd look over all the unused and cut content I could find through my research and findings in each game to speculate and talk about. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the lost and cut content of Silent Hill. In Silent Hill, there is a surprising amount of unused content that didn't make it into the final game, from enemies to textures, and even models of characters that are essential to the plot. Uncovering the game files, there appear to be 7 monsters that are cut. While the explanation for the reason why these monsters never made it into the final game is unclear, we can, at the very least, speculate about them. The butterfly closely resembles the float stinger. One of the enemies Harry Mason fights on the rooftop of the post office. The only difference between the two is the different color palette, with the unused monster having a purple color. The chicken is self-explanatory. It looks very reminiscent of an, well, actual chicken, just without the feathers. It has revealing skin with a shriveled and skinny body, lacks hands, and a belly that sticks out. L resembles a manta ray. The frog resembles a frog. However, this looks far less like a frog with its design, as it has no head in the front of its body, but rather 2 split flesh-like arms that remind me of the mannequin from Silent Hill 2, with its eerily similar design. One of the more odder-named monsters, MKY, is a creature that doesn't feel reminiscent of a real-life animal that influenced the design of this monster. It feels very unique and distinguished from the rest of the unused monsters we've seen thus far. The most notable feature is its teeth, which is soaked with blood, and the arms, which are sharp and pointy at the end. The ostrich is seen as a large enemy type that has a faceless torso. The final unused enemy is a snake. Taking a closer look, this doesn't look reminiscent of a snake, given its large and uncanny appearance that looks more so like a large sack of flesh, with a weird tendril-like feature pointing out. However, what is really interesting about this creature is that it technically made it in the final game, at least in spirit. At some point in the game, Harry roams the streets at night in Silent Hill, where he can find a warning sign about snakes on the side of the street. As to why these enemies didn't make it into the game itself, I imagine it's due in part to their overall design, feeling too normal and not inhuman. Like most of the monsters seen in the final game, they look too normal and don't serve much of an overall purpose in a symbolic sense, as most of the monsters in Silent Hill are physical manifestations of Alessa Gillespie's mental psyche, brought about through her pain, trauma, and tragedy. It's possible Masahiro Ito, the lead monster designer of Silent Hill, couldn't come up with a practical and meaningful use for these unused monsters. Lots of unused images, textures, or text didn't make it into the final game. Here, we can see unused graphics from International Track and Field, one of Konami's more unheard of IPs, featuring Olympic sports events. As to why this is here, we don't know. Possibly used as a reference for the in-game text font. On the diner map is an unused event that displays a "to be continued" message, followed by "coming soon" text over a picture of Dahlia, before kicking the player back to the main menu. This possibly may have been used on one of the various demo discs that had a playable Silent Hill demo. These 6 unused graphics feature hidden doodles and text. Lots of these look like textures that would be used for the environment in the game, such as exteriors or interiors of buildings, or signs for the streets. It shows the developers making notes in a couple of these. In Japanese, one says, "It's a map." The other one says, "sign" or "billboard." One of the biggest oddities in Silent Hill that some players may not know about is this missing newspaper memo. This is missing in both the US and the Japanese release. The reason for this is due to a bug, resulting in incorrect flags being written into the memory and saving game files in these versions. This was fixed in the European and later Japanese releases of the game. The newspaper memo reveals a little about Alessa's past, and may be found on the table in the room to the right of the altar of nowhere. The room itself is an alternate version of Alchemillas Hospital's director's office, and holds the botanical reference book with the entry on White Claudia. What makes this newspaper memo so special, however, is how it is very vague and not specific to the conditions the player must meet to access this, as it is completely random. The only logical conclusion we've come to find and understand is that the player must read every single memo throughout the gameplay, but even then, it still isn't clear. The early version of the game contains a placeholder for the opening title screen in Japanese. This translates to This game contains violent scenes and depictions of grotesque situations. There is a picture of a shelf containing acid in the school laboratory. Here's an unused portrait of Alessa Gillespie with a black background. Here's a portrait of Cheryl Mason, daughter of Harry Mason, with an unused character model. Looking at her appearance, looks very different from the model seen in the final game, at least when it comes to the attire. Finally, here are portraits of Lisa Garland. In this character model, she is seen without her red jacket, and rather with only the white hospital dress along with her hat. The next portrait is a close-up of her face model. The next placeholder images are random ones. One is named Dummy by the developers. In this one, we see a Hawaiian dish, chicken katsu, a game over screen with red text and a green background. We have an early version of the To School memo, an early version of the 11th Street Doghouse Key, and a sketchbook from Cheryl Mason. There are a couple of images with early game mockups of 3D geometry seen in the town of Silent Hill, as well as player models. The model and texture data are appropriate for use on the PlayStation, but too high in graphical quality to be used as real in-game graphics. The residents have no corresponding texture data, but their polygons are colored. These assets may have been used to initially visualize what the game looked like. For being one of the most highly acclaimed and favorited title that is beloved by everyone who played it, there is surprisingly not much cut content I could find in Silent Hill 2. Rather, only a little bit of unused graphics, models, and a text are seen in the early version of Silent Hill 2. In the E3 2001 demo, there are unused graphics written in Japanese. This translates to the following: "This work contains violence, bleeding, and horror expressions." What's very interesting about this warning message is that in the full release of Silent Hill 2, it doesn't have any warning message while starting the game. In the E3 2001 demo, there is a minor difference between the clock puzzle of the E3 build and the final build. However, the only notable detail I could speculate is the lighting on the wall scratches, compared to the final version one lacking in lighting, which gives it a more dark and bleak tone. A graphic from the trial version of the game remains in the final versions of the release, with the text saying, "Coming soon." The earliest pictures and trailers for the marketing of Silent Hill 2 feature a different logo of the game's title. It looks very similar to the Silent Hill logo in the first game, with the exception of the color change having a light green hue. The logo would be changed to the logo we now know for how iconic it is. In the Lost Memories DVD, we have images of early beta builds of the main characters we see in Silent Hill 2, with different designs to their outfits. James Sunderland has the same outfit we see in the release of the game, but he looks more so akin to Harry Mason, possibly a placeholder until they got the correct character model they were looking for during development. Eddie, Angela, and Maria look strikingly different when it comes to their outfits compared to the ones seen in game. One thing anyone would notice is that they all have a blue color palette to their attire. This most likely changed due to the lack of identity in their character design, as they look too similar side by side without distinctive qualities. In the final release, they have their own unique and notable designs for their attire. Possibly, the most infamous piece of lost and cut content in Silent Hill 2 is undoubtedly Old Nelly Street. As the story goes, at some point during the production of Silent Hill 2, Konami released 5 preview pictures of the game. These pictures were of James and a lying figure wandering the streets of Silent Hill, which helped give an idea to the public of what the town would look like. One thing that all 5 pictures had in common was that the buildings shown were all on the same street. This would turn out to be Nelly Street, located in East South Vale in the final version. However, in the final version of the release, there are some of the buildings in those early photos that didn't make it into the game. We can get a mock-up from a previous user on the website, Letter from Silent Haven, painting an idea of where these unused buildings could have been, used in the town of Silent Hill with a map. The question on everyone's mind, I imagine, is what happened to the unused buildings on Old Nelly Street? Well, we don't exactly have a concrete answer to this, although we can speculate that the reason for this concept being cut is due to the PlayStation 2's limitations with its hardware. The polygonal count may have been too high for the PlayStation 2, which would sacrifice memory usage for other aspects of the game. Producer Akihiro Imamura confirms this PS2 memory issue in an interview with IGN. I quote, "A point which we are less happy about is that the PlayStation 2 memory amount is low. The memory amount is too low to place high-quality character models and textures. We had to go through extra struggles to obtain these images." In the Lakeside Amusement Park, there is a memo that can be found titled Harry's Memo. In the early versions of Silent Hill 3, there is a slight difference in this memo, with a different appearance in the lighting and the message in the writing itself that is difficult to read as it is incoherent compared to the final version. In this memo, it reads the following: Daria said that girl is the devil. Kidnapped for the sacrifice. I don't believe in my feeling sick. Is it because of the appearance? That girl resemble with Cheryl based on the picture in the basement of the hospital. The final release of Harry's memo is more comprehensible to make sense of. It reads the following: Dahlia's the one who said it. Said that girl was a demon, that she took my daughter for a sacrifice, but it's not totally believable. I mean, appearances can be deceiving. There is an early version of Heather's photo that you typically find after meeting Vincent in the Hilltop Center office building. It's nothing too drastic in terms of differences compared to the one seen in gameplay. The only difference is the contrast in terms of the quality. Speaking of Hilltop Center, there are both early versions of the elevator shaft that are missing a render of the jack required to open the elevator doors, whereas the final version has the jack seen holding the elevator doors open. An early version of the Hilltop elevator buttons show an early version that is similar to the final release, although its contrast is high compared to the one seen in game, where it's dimmer in terms of its brightness. An unused image of the combination lock numbers on the briefcase is found in room M4 in Brookhaven Hospital, where once again, it is still the same in terms of its presentation, just different in quality when it comes to its contrast. Early images of the Shakespeare anthology books can be found in a puzzle encountered in the My Bestsellers bookstore in the Central Square Shopping Center. In the unused image, the book with the blue spine on the right is titled Macbeth. The book was later renamed the 59th Street Bridge Song. This may have been done to avoid confusion with hints in the puzzle. This is ironic considering these puzzles are already confusing in itself with how incredibly vague they are, especially on higher difficulties. In the latter half of the story, you eventually see Heather finally arriving at the Daisyville apartments to meet her dad, Harry Mason. While here, you're allowed to explore the apartment at your leisure to see the miscellaneous items that are scattered across the apartment. At some point during development, there was a photographed frame on the wall with Heather and Harry Mason together in a family photo. Looking closely, you can see Heather having a different outfit, yet closely resembles the one seen as her standard outfit in-game, albeit with a different colored jacket that is brown. Harry has a reused render that was previously seen in Silent Hill. As to why this was not used in the final game, we don't know. However, it can be speculated that possibly Harry's render was outdated compared to the one with Heather, given how the graphical hardware for the PS2 was ahead of the PS1. A map of the first floor of the Central Square Shopping Center is drastically different in its early version compared to the final release. The early version lacks detail and is more simplistic with its minimalist design. An unused early version of Claudia shows her skin, hair, and eyes appear darker in the earlier version. Her robes are also slightly brighter compared to her final version, which is much more pale in her overall appearance. An unused early version of Douglas features his clothing brighter compared to his final version, which is slightly darker. The early version sees him have a slightly brighter hue of his waistcoat, which has a much lighter tone. His final version has his coat much darker, along with minor adjustments to the proportions of his body. The early version of Heather's model has a darker and more saturated color scheme. The flashlight in Heather's upper left vest pocket has a gray casing instead of green. While very minor, the final model contains slight adjustments to the size of Heather's clothing and the appearance of the wrinkles on her vest. The early versions contain black wristbands above Heather's orange wristbands, which is due to the resulting of a texturing error. In the early model, the legs appear slightly higher in the image, resulting in the texture of the arms being cut off above the wrists. The double head has slight minor differences in the early version of their model. This in particular is the teeth, face, and the wraps, which are given slightly more detail. The missionary has a couple of notable differences when compared side by side to the final version of his character model. Bloodstains are missing on the front of the model in the early version. A different zipper pattern can be found on the back and legs. The head has a darker red color, similar to the color of the gloves, making the head easier to distinguish. The other color differences throughout the model include the shoulders, weapons, pants, and shoes. Much like the missionary, the Vaultiel also has a couple of notable differences. The early character model has white gloves, matching those of Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2. Interestingly enough, Vaultiel and Pyramid Head share a base model. Vaultiel's gloves were likely recolored later in development due to this resemblance to Pyramid Head's character model. When Heather first encounters the Closer in the department store, she picks up a gun and kills it. You can then find a background model deceased. This unused background model may seem familiar to those who played Silent Hill 2, because this is actually a reused model of Angela. The early version of this player model has a higher poly count and texture resolution compared to the final version in-game. This was possibly ditched because the PS2's limited memory. When Heather wakes up from her nightmare in the Happy Burger restaurant, she ponders outside of the window and stays quiet to herself, enjoying the scenery. This peace of serenity is ruined when you realize there is a creepy and eerie floating head of Angela's character model that is outside of the player's view in front of the doors to the restaurant. As to why this is here, I have no idea, and now I wish I didn't. There is an unused animation of the Closer where it is seen in an animation using its tendril-like fist to climb up from a lower level to a higher platform. This possibly was considered at one point in the Nightmare Mall, as you frequently see them roaming around through the mall floors. An unused animation shows the memory of Alessa dismounting a horse on the Happy Carousel. And finally, 2 unused animations of Heather's character model. One unused animation shows Heather turning to look behind her right side and then left side. The other animation sees Heather move her head down, up, left, and right. These are most likely animations from testing the player model with motion capture. In Silent Hill 4, there are a few leftover items in the game that has no use in the final version. These items would be the Dirty Stone and Channeling Stone. Since they have art assets and a localized description implemented, they were likely cut late in development. If you hack them into your inventory, they cannot be used anywhere, as seen here in these images. These stones are not known as to what their intended purpose in the final game would have been. However, one could speculate that these could have been related to the UFO ending in the game, as the UFO ending was originally a feature in Silent Hill 4, much like the previous entries where they all had a UFO ending. Unfortunately, this would be later scrapped during development. Earlier Silent Hill games would require the player to hold on to the channeling stone to obtain the UFO ending. His face is much more unrefined and less realistic, appearing more serious and aggressive. His normal blue shirt has been replaced with a brown jacket and green undershirt. He is also wearing a belt with a yellow belt buckle. If you were to model swap the player model, it is possible to replace Henry's normal player model with this earlier version. For some odd reason, in the game files, there are 2 textures featuring these 2 anime characters from a visual novel titled Mahoken. These are never once displayed in game, so it's really up to anyone's guess as to why they are included here in the game files. On April 4th, 2019, a user that goes by the name Rodolfo Nunez uploaded a video of never-before-seen unused animations of Eileen during the segments where you watch her through a peephole as Henry. Throughout the video, it shows Eileen going about her typical day-to-day life, doing miscellaneous things. The most notable part of this video, however, is the haunting sequence that has never been seen ever in-game. This unused animation shows Eileen doing a very disturbing head movement that twitches aggressively where she makes inaudible noises which are very creepy. There happens to be concept art of unused monsters that are seen here in these sketches that are never seen in the full release of Silent Hill 4. Looking at these sketches of the monsters, it's easy to tell that they look like humanoid figures or anthropomorphic creatures, although it's impossible to tell what these monsters would have been, given my lack of understanding of the Japanese dialect. But it's very interesting to think what these rough sketches of monsters could have been in Silent Hill 4. Silent Hill Origins is a tragedy in itself when you dig through the overall messy development for the developers in question, Climax Studios. Originally, Silent Hill Origins was supposed to be held in development by a Climax Studios branch in Los Angeles, California. At some point, Silent Hill Origins was supposed to be a remake of Silent Hill, exclusive to only the PSP. Admittedly, the developers would be honest and not know what they are doing, and would feel it would be ill-advised to proceed with remaking the first game, especially with how much work they realized it would take from the ground up, so they decided to make something new. This led to Silent Hill Origins, a prequel to Silent Hill. The original development is drastically different compared to what we got with the final release we see nowadays. Luckily for us, there have been over 20 minutes of a leaked prototype build of Silent Hill Origins that allows the player to play the early prototype version of the game. A YouTuber, The Kempy, got a hold of a build of this version of Silent Hill Origins that shows a completely different gameplay style than the final release. For starters, this featured a departure from the dynamic third-person view to rather a focus on the Resident Evil 4 style camera angle and an emphasis on action-oriented combat scene and gameplay, as opposed to the previous installments in the series. In the early prototype, Travis had 6 weapons, divided equally between melee weapons and firearms. Additional changes include a laser sight for his pistol and an option for the player to barricade areas. At the time of this early prototype, the game was expected to be released in late 2006. However, this early version of Silent Hill Origins would fall through as issues with the game's engine and confusion with the direction of the game led to Climax shutting down their Los Angeles studio and transferred the game's team to the Climax Studio branch in Portsmouth, United Kingdom. There would of course be lost and cut content along the way. In the early prototype version, there would be this monster called the Afflicted, a recurring enemy seen throughout the town of Silent Hill. They appear to have pale and dried up skin that shows them more zombie-like. The monster, the meat, seems to be referencing that of a meat hook, given its hooks on the upper torso of the split body that is on top of its head and at the bottom for its feet. The miner has pickaxes for its arms that seem to be used as weapons, as well as a gas mask and a hunched back body. The piercer has sharp blades that are massive in size, as well as sharp pointy tendrils. The undead bellhop is a mystery to me, as I don't have much of a clue as to what it would have been. The wheelchair monster looks deceased and mutated in its design, having its lower body stuck and plastered to the seat of a wheelchair. The upper torso would seemingly be used to carry itself around with its arms. There originally was a cut antagonist called Mr. Twilight. Mr. Twilight would have been a puppeteer of sorts, pulling the strings behind the scenes, while Travis would explore the town of Silent Hill. During early development, Travis Grady would use Norman Reedus as a reference for the character's face model. Interestingly enough, Norman Reedus would initially be the protagonist of the cancelled Silent Hills. Everything after the Team Silent games and Silent Hill Origins, I, unfortunately, couldn't find much unused or cut content that was as prominent as the ones seen here previously. However, there is still cut content worth checking out, even if it is rather small. In the spin-off, Silent Hill the Arcade, there's an unused graphic of a numb body. A white graphic texture has the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 written as text, and a placeholder texture that reads water is probably used to test the water effects during development. Silent Hill Homecoming has 2 concept art drawings of water creatures that were possibly considered at some point during development. Many of them seem to be wrapped and tied with rope around their bodies and have a weight tied to their feet, weighing them down. As to how these monsters would have worked in gameplay, I have no idea, leaving only more questions than answers. In Silent Hill 4, the main protagonist, Henry Townsend, age is unknown. There are not many sources, such as articles, game magazines, strategy guides, or even the game's booklet, that have commented on Henry's age. However, a European site for Silent Hill 4, when it was still accessible, mentioned he was in his late 20s. Henry is the first Silent Hill protagonist, with the exclusion of spin-offs, to have his exact age unknown. If we take a look at Henry's original beta design, it was drastically different compared to his final design. In the beta version, Henry had a brown button-up shirt tucked into his pants. He also appears to be wearing a green undershirt along with a visible belt with a golden belt buckle. This would later be changed to the final design, which looks very similar. However, Henry has a bright blue button-up shirt that instead has a white undershirt and isn't tucked into his waistpants. If the player examines Henry's shoes, he makes some odd and questionable comments. He can't remember when and where he bought them, wondering if the shoes are truly his, and sounds vaguely uncertain that he bought them in Silent Hill. While in room 302, if the player were to examine the peephole into the hallways of the apartment complex, it's possible to encounter a haunting of a haunted version of Henry. If you listen closely, you can hear whispering that is very faint. Some players have speculated that this haunted version of Henry is whispering or mouthing the words, "Please help me," but this is up to interpretation. If the player equips Henry with a golf club and waits long enough, he will begin to practice his swings. If the player equips the shovel, he will lean on it like a cane. If the player is also patient enough with a chainsaw, he will scream and shake it above his head. Funnily enough, James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2 will also emit these actions when equipped with the chainsaw. Henry is a very common French name for boys. It's believed to be derived from the French name Henry, which is thought to be derived from the name Heimerick, an old German name that means house ruler. Coincidentally, much of Henry's time is spent trapped in his apartment in room 302. The name Townsend is of English origin, meaning end of town, a combination of the Old English terms tun meaning town and endi meaning end. Townsend was once known as a topographical name for people who populated city limits. Henry also happens to be living in the town of Ashfield, a city that you can see outside of your apartment window, full of life. In Silent Hill Book of Memories, Henry is referenced in the joke ending, as Heather Mason is working at the front desk at a motel in Silent Hill. She becomes annoyed by the tourists. An employee then tells her that the guest in room 302 locked himself in again. She then slams her head against the desk in frustration and passes out. Henry seems to have an occupation in photography, or possibly is his hobby he finds himself enjoying. If we look at room 302, there are many scenic shots of landscapes that feature buildings or environments that attract Henry for their natural beauty. This is further supported by his desk, which has several books, a scrapbook, and a portfolio. While the player never once visits the town of Silent Hill, with the exception of Silent Hill Forest. Silent Hill is referenced through images that are framed by Henry's photographs. When the player approaches these set photos, Henry can make comments on landmarks that he visited during his time at Silent Hill. These locations in particular are Toluca Lake, Balkan Church, and the Lighthouse. Compared to most Silent Hill protagonists who are more loud and vocal with their reactions to their surroundings to the horrors around them, Henry is much more quiet and introverted, not speaking much as he is more observant and much of a listener. It's also important to note that Henry isn't riddled with a tragic backstory with pain and trauma like other previous and future protagonists. Rather, the only protagonist who has had a seemingly normal and happy life up until the events of Silent Hill 4. Henry's voice actor, Eric Bosick, also shares an interest in photography, much like the character he voices. Eileen is the first character in the Silent Hill series who can help assist the player when combating the monsters in gameplay. She can initially attack opponents with her weak and short-ranged handbag, but the player can locate and provide Eileen with other weapons that are far more formidable. Interestingly enough, Eileen can't die during gameplay, with the exception of the final boss fight. As the game progresses, it becomes evident that Eileen is being slowly possessed by Walter. When Eileen takes heavy or constant damage during or throughout the battle, she will be strongly influenced and controlled by his force. If you listen closely, Eileen can talk in a gibberish tone that is hard to understand and comes off as cryptic. However, if you decipher the slow and reverted messaging, she states the following: And God said, Thou must return to the wellspring of sin, separate from the flesh too, she who is the mother reborn, and he who is the final receiver of wisdom. If Eileen is strongly possessed or injured, as indicated by the bloody veins on her skin, she will violently begin attacking herself with whatever weapon she happens to be carrying at the time. In the hospital world, the player can discover a giant manifestation of Eileen's head at the end of a long room. Its eyes follow Henry from left to right when moving around the room. If you come back to this room with Eileen, the Eileen head refuses to acknowledge Eileen, and Eileen does not mention the Eileen head itself, only choosing to still focus its attention on Henry. This is most likely a physical manifestation exclusive to Henry that may reflect Henry's past observations spying on Eileen, previously through the peephole. During the sequences where Henry and Eileen are paired, if you wait patiently, you can hear a rare sneeze from Eileen.
Drink. Did you just sneeze?
Eileen's room contains two references to Silent Hill 3. The first is a painting of squares found in the Gallery of Fine Arts in the Hilltop Center. The second is an orange skirt found in Boutique Marguerite in the Central Square Shopping Center. Cynthia Velasquez makes a guest appearance in Dance Dance Revolution Extreme in the song Your Rain Rage Mix. She is seen walking through an alley and sitting on a sofa singing Your Rain. She is also seen dancing with two other women and then leaving the alley. If the name Frank Sunderland sounds familiar, this is because he is the father of James Sunderland, the playable protagonist seen previously in Silent Hill 2. While in the apartment world, the player can find notes mentioning a character named Rachel. Next to these notes, you can find a bloody nurse uniform with her name displayed. Interestingly, in Silent Hill 2, when James Sunderland is talking to Laura, Laura mentions a nurse named Rachel, the nurse who took care of Mary Shepard Sunderland, James's late wife. The person who resembles the woman from the photo of Frank Sunderland in room 301 can once again be seen while observing through the window of room 302 as Henry. This is most likely Rachel. If the player chooses to examine a picture above Henry's couch in room 302, Henry comments on Frank's son and daughter-in-law disappearing in Silent Hill. He states the following: I got this photo from Sunderland, the superintendent. I heard his son and daughter-in-law disappeared in Silent Hill a few years back. This is a reference to James Sunderland and his wife, Mary Shepard Sunderland, as well as the events of Silent Hill 2. The character, Andrew DiSalvo, has a chance to appear outside of room 302's window. If the player waits long enough, a paler version of Andrew's severed head falls downwards for a split second when Henry returns from the building world. Clifford Ripple, the voice actor for Vincent Smith, a major character who appeared in Silent Hill 3, auditioned for Jasper's role twice, but didn't get the role. If you look closely at Jasper's shirt, an incubus with the word Hardes beneath it can be seen. Hardes is another way of saying Flaros, a reference to the Flaros from Silent Hill 1. The incubus is the final boss from Silent Hill 1 as well. This is the second time the name Geen is used for a Silent Hill character. In Silent Hill 2, when James and Maria are in the elevator in Nightmare Brookhaven Hospital, a radio talk show host can be heard hosting a game show. In this game show, Eric Geen is listed as one of the 3 possible names of a murderer to solve the trick or treat box puzzle.
What was the name of the murderer who committed this vile act? 1. Walter Sullivan. 2. Scott Fairbanks. 3. Eric Gaines.
Steve Garland, one of the many ghosts you encounter, is the only ghost who uses weapons other than spectral force, as most other ghosts do. Rather, he uses his spade as a weapon, dealing lots of damage in swings of high speed. Peter Wells, a ghost that appears in the building world, is used for the ghost character model in the spin-off Silent Hill Book of Memories. There's a random chance the phone in Henry's bedroom appears ringing and will have a male voice. The male voice in question, Joseph Schreiber, appears to be saying the following: I'm always watching you. I'm always watching you. I'm always watching you.
I'm always watching you. I'm always watching you.
The music video for Tender Sugar features Joseph for a couple of frames, wearing headphones and listening to a boombox. Joseph's last name, Schreiber, is German for writer, a subtle nod to his occupation as a journalist. Joseph is mentioned previously in Silent Hill 3 in his published magazine article titled Joseph's Article. According to Masahiro Sumboyama, when asked about his favorite character in Silent Hill 4, he states that Richard Braintree was his favorite character to work on. This is what he has to say. "I guess my favorite character was Richard's ghost. To have an enemy that moves like a record scratch isn't something we've done before, I don't think. Richard's ghost has this design that seems like something anyone could think up. He looks like a zombie, an everyday middle-aged man, but he has this bizarre way of moving and such that we went out of our way to emphasize. I myself really thought that this was an interesting part of this installment. In his artwork, Richard has light blue eyes, instead of his gray eyes that you see in the game. Richard is the only ghost who can walk and teleport, aside from Walter Sullivan. Jimmy Stone, the ghost that you first encounter in the opening of the game, is the descendant of the 1860s Reverend Stone, a priest of the Valtiel sector of the Order, who serves the angel Valtiel. The sector of the cult is considered closer to God than other sectors and is tasked with carrying out ritualistic murders as executioners. In Silent Hill 2, when James finds a canned juice to throw down the trash chute, he can find the Old Man coin in a newspaper article. In this newspaper article, it contains the first mention of Jimmy Stone. If you look closely, Jimmy Stone appears in the results screen background of Silent Hill 4. The Silent Hill 4 original soundtrack's artwork features Jimmy Stone getting pierced by the Sword of Obedience. Walter Sullivan is first mentioned in Silent Hill 2 in a newspaper article found outside the Woodside Apartments. Walter is the first and only antagonist to be mentioned before making an official debut in Silent Hill 4, The Room. In Nightmare Brookhaven Hospital, Walter is mentioned during the radio game show, while James and Maria are in the hospital elevator, as one of the answers for the trick-or-treat box puzzle. In the labyrinth, before the Eddie boss fight, the player can find a room that resembles a cemetery. One of the graves in particular displays Walter Sullivan. In the hospital world, Walter is seen disemboweling a corpse that resembles Claudia Wolf, the main antagonist of Silent Hill 3. It's possible that Team Silent reused Claudia's character model as the basis of this corpse. One of Room 302's hauntings includes Henry's photograph of a church shifting into a portrait of Walter Sullivan. When looking through Henry's peephole, Walter may occasionally visit Henry's front door to stare into it ominously. When compared side by side, young Walter Sullivan and adult Walter Sullivan have a different shade of eye colors. Walter is the only main antagonist in the Silent Hill series to have his own respective final boss fight. Walter appears as a cameo in the joke ending of Silent Hill Book of Memories. He is seen knocking on the door that the tourists are currently residing in, asking for room service, frightening one of them. In Silent Hill Homecoming, there was cut content of an unused audio file that would have featured a young Walter Sullivan being interviewed. In this audio recording, a therapist shows a young Walter a picture of a door, which Walter states is his mommy. When the therapist asks Walter if his mother is sleeping, Walter screams at him saying, "Show me your heart," which results in the therapist panicking and a loud crash can be heard.
Okay. Do you want to tell me that story again?
I don't know.
Do you want to play a game instead?
Alright. Sure.
Why don't you tell me what you think of when I show you these pictures? Okay? Just tell me whatever you think of.
That's my mommy.
Okay. How about this one?
That's my mommy.
This one is your mommy also?
Uh-huh.
Is this one your mommy too?
That's not my mommy.
Walter?
That's not my mommy.
Are you sure?
That's not my mommy.
Calm down, Walter. Calm down. This is your mommy.
No, 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 no.
Yes, it is. This is your mommy. This one is only a door. See?
Mommy?
What do you want to tell your mommy?
Why won't you wake up, Mommy?
Is your mommy sleeping, Walter?
Show me your heart. Show me your heart.
Orderly! Orderly!
At some point in Silent Hill 4, if you look outside of Room 302's window, there's a chance of seeing a Robbie the Rabbit hot air balloon floating in the sky. In the Walter Sullivan victim files, Miriam Locane's silhouette can be seen holding a Robbie the Rabbit doll. In the subway world, the player can encounter a worm-like monster known as the Greedy Worm. This is the only unkillable monster in Silent Hill 4. In the Silent Hill comic, Sinner's Reward, female sniffer dogs can be seen feeding on a corpse in one of the comic panels. When hurt, hummers will make a sound similar to that of a pendulum from Silent Hill 3. When first entering the building world, if you were to tilt your camera upwards, the player can see gumheads jumping across buildings. In Silent Hill, the arcade, gumheads make an appearance as an enemy. The leech-like monsters called Tremors appear in both Silent Hill the arcade and Silent Hill Book of Memories. The wheelchair enemy, first seen in the hospital world, can show a shadow of a figure moving from its seat. The wheelchair makes an appearance as an enemy in Silent Hill the Escape. The twin victim is one of the few monsters in the Silent Hill series that can speak in their monstrous forms. The twin victim was designed by Masaya Akada. When asked what his favorite monster is in the Silent Hill series, Masahiro Ito stated that the twin victim is his favorite Silent Hill monster. In the Silent Hill comic, Dead/Alive, the twin victims make an appearance in a couple of comic panels. Masahiro Ito doesn't make a return to design the monsters for Silent Hill 4. Silent Hill 3 would, at the time, be the last time he worked on the Silent Hill series, as he left Konami in 2004. Jun Inoue would be the monster designer for Silent Hill 4. The photo of Silent Hill in the living room appears to be a processed photo of Venice Punta della Dogana. In Silent Hill Downpour, Murphy Pendleton's jail cell number is 302B. This is likely a reference to room 302. An Easter egg appears in Silent Hill Downpour with a replica of room 302. In the Silent Hill comic and story, Anne Cunningham and Mark Cunningham are seen in a house or apartment that looks very similar to room 302 and the comic panels. There is an unused map of room 302 that would have been found in the apartment world. In the Silent Hill 4 instructions manual, it shows a list of all the hauntings that can be found in the game, as well as a map of room 302 that displays where each haunting takes place. In total, there are 14 hauntings. During the loading screens, the halo of the sun and the images of a ghost will sometimes appear. The images can be controlled using the analog thumbsticks. The radio in Henry's living room plays various broadcasts. In one of these broadcasts, it reports the arrest of a man named Suguru Mirakoshi, who was discovered naked and urinating from the top of a utility pole. Suguru Mirakoshi is the director of Silent Hill 4. After completing the building world for the second time, a brief reference to Silent Hill 2 can be found in room 302. When the player enters the bathroom and examines the toilet, Henry will notice something stuck inside, and the player will be given a choice of whether they should fetch it out or not. However, either answer will result in Henry deciding against reaching into the toilet because he's not brave enough. There are some leftover assets from a scrapped UFO ending, though this was never completed, most likely due to time constraints during development. However, these items can be displayed using action replay codes, although they cannot be used. These items in particular are the Dirty Stone, the Channeling Stone, Courtyard Key, and Red Oil. The Channeling Stone is seen previously in Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2 for their respective UFO endings. An unused animation of an Eileen haunting can be found in the PC's game files. In this haunting, it shows Eileen with violent shaking coursing through her body while making gasping noises in her animations. Three unused character models are found in the PC game files that would have been used as background textures for the spiral staircase that you would use to traverse Walter's other worlds. These unused models would be a patient model holding a bandaged baby-like corpse, a pregnant woman model, and a nurse model operating on a patient. In the PC game files, there exist two unrelated texture images of some characters from the adult visual novel Mohican. These images are never once displayed in Silent Hill 4. The spinning structure seen during the final boss fight against Walter is based on the gravity drive device from a 1997 sci-fi horror movie, Event Horizon. A moth can be found on the spiral staircase if the player uses camera hacks. This may be a nod to Alessa, as Alessa is fond of moths, as she is seen to have a moth collection displayed on her wall in Silent Hill 3. The only weapon you can still fight with after it breaks is the wine bottle. Interestingly, it becomes even more dangerous as a weapon when broken. In the Silent Hill comic and story, and is seen wearing Eileen's nurse costume, an unlockable costume you get in Silent Hill 4, after beating the game twice where Eileen survives. The stun gun is a secret weapon that can be found in the water prison, similar to the same weapon from Silent Hill 3, except in Silent Hill 4, it requires no batteries or ammunition, allowing for infinite use. Usually, 2 silver bullets can be found in Silent Hill 4 while exploring the subway and forest worlds. However, a secret 3rd bullet can be found. After collecting the keys of liberation after Room 302 of the past, a silver bullet will appear on the bed in Eileen's hospital room in the hospital world. In a promotional booth at E3 2004, there was a real-life replica of Room 302 that audiences could enter to play the E3 trial version of Silent Hill 4. There is an exclusive Japan-only promotional DVD of Silent Hill 4 that contains exclusive footage that is not seen in the final release. Contrary to popular belief, during its development, Silent Hill 4 was always meant to be connected to Silent Hill, or at the very least, as a spin-off to Silent Hill. In an interview with both Masashi Sumbayama and Akira Yamaoka, when asked by Boomtown if Silent Hill 4 was not originally going to be part of the Silent Hill series, they state the following. In a sense, this is true because the game began life as simply Room 302. However, it was always at least a spin-off of Silent Hill, and the most important thing was simply that it would be different from the previous games. Certainly, if Silent Hill had not existed, we would not have gotten the idea for the room, so in that sense, they have always been together. There are 2 concept art images of monsters that are sketches of potential designs that possibly could have been implemented in Silent Hill 4. However, these designs were later unused. The likeness of Henry Townsend is shared with actor Peter Krause. Akira Yamaoka and Masashi Sumbayama have confirmed in an interview with Kikizo Games that writer Ryu Murakami's book Coin Locker Babies and the film The Cell as inspirations for the game's premise. Mary Elizabeth McGlynn reprises her role as the lead vocalist for the Silent Hill 4 original soundtrack, previously seen in Silent Hill 3. Her favorite song from the Silent Hill series is Room of Angel, which she happens to provide the vocals for. It can be missed, but when re-entering Room 302 during the first half of the game, Henry's health will slowly heal over time. However, during the second half, Room 302 will not heal you. Silent Hill 4 is the first game in the Silent Hill series to introduce directional controls, as opposed to the previous games, which were predominantly tank controls. Silent Hill 4 introduces breakable weapons in the series. Previously, weapons weren't breakable and didn't have any durability. This would continue to be a recurring trend in the future Silent Hill games. Silent Hill 4 is the only Silent Hill game with limited inventory. Previously, the player could store however many items or weapons they wanted without limitations. Silent Hill 4 does not feature the return of the flashlight or radio that is previously seen in the prior games. There is a hidden Easter egg found in Dishonored 2 that the player can find when looking into a window that shows the chain door of Room 302. In the psychological horror game, Visage has an Easter egg that features Room 302. The player would open the door to find the room itself, to then find a ghost dancing to dubstep music. Ion Fury has an Easter egg where the player can find a recreation of Room 302. In Demonologist, it has an Easter egg of the iconic Halo of the Sun Hole. Silent Hill is one of the most popular survival horror franchises of all time. Over 2 decades, it's bound to create such notable moments throughout each game that have the player make such memories for many years to come. However, even though we may have thought we knew everything about this franchise and what it has to offer, that is far from the truth. There is a surprising amount of mysteries, secrets, Easter eggs, and hidden lore that even the biggest Silent Hill fan may not know about, which is what today's Iceberg is going to be talking about. To be more specific, the Silent Hill Iceberg. Now, for those unaware as to what an iceberg is, essentially, icebergs are divided into 5 layers, each about such trivia, facts, or lore regarding a subject. In this context, Silent Hill is where we go through well-known information regarding the franchise in the beginning, but as we go deeper into the iceberg, the more obscure and unknown the information becomes. Before we begin, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Reddit user Ciar Moro for creating this iceberg. This iceberg will contain spoilers on the Silent Hill games. Anyways, let's begin. Joke endings. In each Silent Hill game, there are typically joke endings that the player can unlock upon meeting previous requirements in previous playthroughs. A good example of these joke endings is the UFO endings. In Silent Hill 2, you would have to beat the game's 3 main endings to unlock the UFO ending. In doing so, you'll find the channeling stone in the restroom of the observation deck at the beginning of the game in a new playthrough. You'll need to carry this channeling stone to 3 specific locations to use to trigger an event. If done correctly, James will be encountered by aliens, also known as Greys, where he asks if they have seen his wife, Mary. He also encounters Harry Mason, the previous protagonist in Silent Hill 1. Another example of a joke ending is seen in Silent Hill 2 with the dog ending. To get this ending, you need to once again beat the game 3 times and get its 3 main endings. In a new playthrough, you need to go to West South Vale to acquire the dog key at the doghouse. Play through the game as usual up into the Nightmare Hotel sequence. After James watches the VHS tape, head to the observatory deck to get the dog ending. Here, you find out that Mira the dog was the one who orchestrated the events of Silent Hill 2 all along. These are only 2 of many joke endings seen throughout the franchise that I won't be getting into, for the sake of spoilers at least, but these are the most popular joke endings that I can think of. Pop culture references. Silent Hill is known to make lots of references to pop culture throughout most of the games. They are sometimes seen on the streets of Silent Hill 1, as homages to such 90s media, such as The Shining. Other times, the references are made solely through being the inspiration behind the horror itself. Such examples are Jacob's Ladder, a huge fundamental component for inspiring much of the body horror you see in Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. A good example of this is the head-twitching scene with the first encounter of the lying figure. This is a reference to the head-twitching that is also seen in Jacob's Ladder. The same head-twitching is also seen in the opening of Silent Hill 3 with the Closer. Easter eggs. Silent Hill is known to have some Easter eggs sprinkled throughout each of its games, whether the Easter eggs are in-universe with references paying respect to their former installment, or other video game franchises that have a reference to Silent Hill. To give a couple examples of such Easter eggs, in Silent Hill 3, there's an Easter egg where if you go to a restroom stall, you have the option to have Heather put her hand in the toilet. If you do so, Heather will try to put her hand in the toilet, but quickly dismiss this idea as she finds it disgusting, questioning who would do such a thing. Tsurushi then looks at the player. This is a reference to Silent Hill 2, where James willingly puts his hand into the toilet to get the locker code. The car James drives to Silent Hill, which is seen in the observation deck at the beginning of the game, is reused as Jasper Gein's car in Silent Hill 4. When you enter the forest world, Henry will walk throughout the Silent Hill forest to stumble upon a car that is similar to James's car. In Metal Gear Solid 3, there are 2 paintings featured from Silent Hill 3 that can be found on the 2nd floor of Graniny Gorky Lab. In the psychological horror game, Visage, you can find Room 302 from Silent Hill 4, which shows an exact recreation of the room itself. Secret weapons. Secret weapons in Silent Hill are seen as mostly unlockables that provide a higher damage output or limited ammunition than normal weapons found in previous playthroughs. Depending on the criteria, you have to meet specific requirements to unlock said secret weapon. These secret weapons include the Hyper Blaster from Silent Hill 1, unlocked after achieving the UFO ending, the Hyper Spray from Silent Hill 2, unlocked depending on the ranking achieved after beating a previous playthrough, the Beam Saber from Silent Hill 3, unlocked after beating the game with more melee kills rather than firearm kills. However, you can unlock the Beam Saber by default after completing your 2nd playthrough. Inspirations. It's an understatement to say the least that Silent Hill takes a lot of inspiration from other types of genres in literature or movies that are used as the basis to comprise much of the narrative, symbolism, themes, horror, etc. Such inspirations include Jacob's Ladder, David Lynch films, the Russian novel Crime and Punishment, and Stephen King. Mary in the Back Seat. In Silent Hill 2, at the plot twist, it's revealed that James Sunderland killed his wife, Mary. We also learn that Mary wasn't killed 3 years ago, but rather, very recently, possibly a couple days before the events of Silent Hill 2. Upon initial speculation, it can be speculated that because James had recently killed Mary, her corpse is actually in the trunk of James's car at the beginning of the game. However, if we take a look at the Book of Lost Memories, the novelization of Silent Hill 2, there's a section in the novel called Justice, Book of Lost Memories. This chapter affirms this with the in water ending. Furthermore, when a Twitter user asked Masahiro Ito about the theory, he stated that he believed Mary's body was actually in the back seat, not the trunk. When questioned how James didn't notice her corpse, Ito replied that James had repressed the memory of her murder. Silent Hill 1 Unused Monsters. It's inevitable for video games to contain some form of unused or cut content that was initially considered at one point during development, but ultimately, was scrapped due to unforeseeable circumstances. In this context, Silent Hill 1 has a surprising amount of cut content behind the scenes. When uncovering the game files, it's been found that 7 unused monsters were considered at one point, but ultimately went unused. These monsters in particular are the monkey, the ostrich, the chicken, the frog, the butterfly, the snake, and the manta ray. More recently, when data mining the game files, 2 test models were also discovered that were filed as Big and Spider. However, these most likely were never considered to be actual enemies, merely just testing the model's animations. Ambulance Ending. Back in the late 90s, when the internet was still newly accessible and in the early stages of its life, it was bound that message forums or websites on such topics that fandoms were collectively interested in were inevitably going to get their dedicated server to talk about said topic of interest. This in particular was Silent Hill 1. As Silent Hill 1 was still new at the time, especially during the late 90s into early 2000s, it was only a matter of time before people wanted to talk to others about the story, characters, symbolism, strategy guides, and so much more. However, one interesting topic that was unbeknownst to many people at the time was the ambulance ending. Supposedly, the ambulance ending was one of the secret unlockable endings that the player can unlock in Silent Hill 1. Some players on message forums would comment on claiming to have received a 5th secret ending. According to the rumor, finishing the game on hard difficulty with at least 9 out of 10 ranking will allow the player in the next playthrough to unlock the 5th ending. To do this, you would have to collect the bottle of distilled water and the glucose in the Midwich Elementary School, items that were originally unobtainable before. Upon getting these items, the player would then have to construct an explosive to blow open the traffic gate across from Alchemilla Hospital. Once the explosive goes off and allows you to enter, you would then need to find fuel at the gas station in the resort area later in the game. Finally, once the fuel is acquired, you place it in the abandoned ambulance near the hospital and drive it. Harry would then drive off in the ambulance out of Silent Hill. Now obviously, this quote-unquote 5th secret ending is false and just an urban legend developed by the community. However, even though this is fake, there's an old video back from 2007 titled Silent Hill Ambulance Ending, which goes into detail on how to accomplish the ambulance ending. Laura's Prayer and the Reverse Will. In Silent Hill 2, the soundtrack called The Reverse Will is usually associated with the rebirth ending they listen to during the credits. Now, at first glance, it may not seem like much, just sounds very trip-hop or funky in its sound design. But there's actually a secret message in the song itself that you can hear. When you reverse the song backward, you can make out a voice that is similar to Laura's. In this message, it reads, I pray the Lord, my soul to keep. If I should die, before I wake, I pray the Lord, my soul to take. The lyrics originate from the 18th century children's bedtime prayer, Now Lay Me Down to Sleep. Fukuro. Fukuro is a 3-minute short film developed by Masahiro Ito in 2001. It was released on The Art of Silent Hill, Lost Memories, The Art of Silent Hill, and The Silent Hill Experience. The short film follows the protagonist, Fukuro, in Japanese, bag or sack, where the Fukuro lady is put in these bizarre, disturbing, and surreal positions with the monsters from Silent Hill 2, such as Pyramid Head or the Lying Figure. Lots of the framing is very suggestive, but it's very abstract and uncomfortable in its body horror. Interestingly, some of the monsters are early concepts that didn't make it into Silent Hill 2, such as the box monster, which you can see in the short film and concept art. When asked on Twitter what the purpose and message of the short film Fukuro is supposed to represent, Masahiro Ito states he imagined the womb of a female abstractly. Kiniko, a similar short film titled Kiniko, in Japanese, Mushrooms, is a very abstract and surreal 5-minute short film that is very reminiscent of the previous short film, Fukuro. However, the short film is not as nearly disturbing or unsettling in its presentation, rather very odd and bizarre. It follows the toadstools from Silent Hill 4, a recurring enemy that is very tall and lengthy as it sprouts from the ground and blocks your path, requiring you to deal damage to pass through. Much of the short film is just a creative art piece and a form of expression that would promote the track Kiniko on the Silent Hill Sounds box, a collection of Silent Hill game soundtracks along with new ones. "They look like monsters to you." The comment, "They look like monsters to you," is stated in Silent Hill 3 by the character Vincent Smith, a very ominous and mysterious character that you can't get much of a reading on throughout the game, as he's very cryptic in his personality. In the final location, the chapel, you run into Vincent in the library. In this cutscene, Heather asks Vincent if she is talking about the, quote, monsters, to which Vincent states, "This causes Heather to panic and be disturbed, thinking that she is actually killing humans this whole time." However, Vincent states that it's nothing but a joke. I believe the reason why this entry is here is because of the implications that this gives to the player, questioning if the monsters in Silent Hill 3, or really any Silent Hill game, that the monsters are actually humans, although this is just merely speculation. Silent Hill 2 minimap. At some point during development, Silent Hill 2 would have featured a minimap that the player can use to navigate the environment. While this may not have been featured as a staple in the main game, it's actually accessible, albeit through a series of complex button combinations on the PlayStation 2. To accomplish this, first, you must have completed the dog ending. After you have completed the dog ending, the controller type must be set to 2 if you're playing on the international versions of the game. Finally, press the following buttons: Start, plus L2, plus Square, plus 3, while simultaneously entering the inventory menu screen, exiting, and holding the start button while exiting. Valtiel revives Heather. In Silent Hill 3, if the player dies, it's possible to get a game over screen where we see Heather being dragged away by one of the monsters, Valtiel. It's assumed that Valtiel revives Heather at a safer location by resurrecting the god inside her. Valtiel is seen as a passive and non-hostile monster to Heather, possibly because he is symbolic of being God's attendant, observing Heather to ensure the birth of God. Drivable school bus. The drivable school bus is honestly something that I'm not too sure about. The only conclusion I can come to is that this drivable school bus entry refers to the school bus you find in Silent Hill 1. This school bus is located by Midwich Elementary School, and you can actually enter this school bus to collect items if needed. It's possible that much like the ambulance ending, the idea of driving the school bus was also an urban myth that players spread amongst each other as rumors back in the day. Heather can sit. In Silent Hill 3, there is a hidden idle animation that sees Heather sighing after standing for a long period of time, to then crouching down. It's assumed that this idle animation only works in the shopping mall, as other players have posted the same idle animation in different locations of the shopping mall. James looking at the player. In Silent Hill 2, the opening cutscene sees James looking at himself in the mirror, where he then proceeds to brush his hand across his face. There would go on to be a popular fan theory that James is not staring at himself, but rather staring at the player. The reason why fans speculated about this theory is because if you were to enhance the levels and brightness of the image of James looking at himself in the mirror, it looks as if James is looking at the player. However, Masahiro Ito debunks this theory, claiming that James never intended to look at the player, rather just looks at himself. Akihiro Imamura's friend. According to the making of Silent Hill 2, when asked, Akihiro Imamura would comment that the physical appearance and character model of Eddie Dombrowski would be based on his friend, Eddie's van. In Silent Hill 2, when roaming the observation deck, the player can find a white van that is parked near the stairway to the forest. It's speculated that this white van is actually owned by Eddie. In the opening FMV of Silent Hill 2, you can see a cutscene of Eddie and Laura beside the aforementioned white van, where they are talking to each other, although it's not confirmed if this is Eddie's actual van. Lisa cries in Silent Hill theme. In the cancelled Silent Hill /PT, there's the possibility that the player can hear Lisa, the main antagonist, crying in the audio recording via a radio. This would later appear as an Easter egg in Metro Exodus, a post-apocalyptic survival horror game. A video uploaded to Facebook by the user, JCSC, sees the player entering an abandoned house. When exploring, he reaches a red radio, where if you listen closely, you can hear the same audio of Lisa crying from Silent Hill /PT. However, when it comes to Lisa crying in the Silent Hill theme, assuming this refers to Lisa Garland, I couldn't find any evidence of this. Silent Hill 1 through 4, all working by the same rules. I'm assuming this entry is referring to the town of Silent Hill itself when it comes to the fog world, the other world, or the physical manifestations of the monsters being projections of the character's fears, traumas, and desires. These rules also have the underlying theme of the cult, the order, being either direct or referenced in Silent Hill 1 through 4. Room 209 Whisper Origins. In Silent Hill 2, when James finds himself in the Blue Creek Apartments, he eventually finds himself in Room 209. Now, there is the possibility that in Room 209, the player can hear a whisper if they are idle long enough. Initially, when players heard this voice, this of course caused lots of speculation and theories as to what this could mean. One interpretation some users claimed to hear was, "See my dead wife, I'll come home, load some laundry to escape, and maybe take her to the car so it takes some space." In reality, the whisper in Room 209 is nothing more than a voice actor rehearsing his lines, speaking in incomprehensible words or gibberish that would be later used as one of the many random noises you can hear in the game. Moeco Company Images. In Silent Hill 4, when users uncover the game files, they unexpectedly found unused texture assets of 2 images of anime girls wearing maid outfits. It's unknown why these 2 texture assets were left in the game files. All that we do know is that these are 2 characters that originate from the adult visual novel, Moecan. Atlanta 1996 Olympic Games sprites. In Silent Hill 1, when data mining the game files, users found unused images from the Konami IP, International Track and Field, a 3D update of Konami's Track and Field arcade series, in which up to 4 players compete in 11 different Olympic events. It appears that International Track and Field would have assets that were later reused for sprites or in-game images in Silent Hill 1, with some left over and unused. Valtael torturing Lisa. While Valtael is seen as passive and non-hostile when it comes to Heather, he is quite the opposite when it comes to the other monsters in Silent Hill 3. If the player were to hack the camera in environments where Valtael is present, you can see that Valtael is physically harassing and abusing them. One of these monsters in particular appears to be a nurse. It might seem odd as to why Valtael is enacting this action, specifically this nurse, but this nurse is supposed to be a physical manifestation of Lisa Garland, as Lisa was Alessa's caretaker and nurse to aid her, while Alessa was bedridden for 7 years. Buttercake. Buttercake is an item that can be found in the Silent Hill games. As far as we're concerned, Buttercake has no relevance to the player, especially when it comes to being an item that heals you or has any purpose whatsoever. However, the Silent Hill community has gone on to make the butter cake as a running gag where they jokingly try to find all the butter cakes they can in each of the games. So far, they've only appeared in Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, Silent Hill 4, and as a purchasable DLC artifact that increases the player's stats in the spin-off Silent Hill Book of Memories. Funnily enough, a Tumblr user, Gourmet Gaming, would go on to create an actual recipe to create a real-life butter cake. James adopts Laura. In the Leave ending of Silent Hill 2, after James reconciles and makes amends with his wife's death, Mary, he is later seen leaving the town of Silent Hill, alongside Laura. It's ambiguous as to what happens to them after the events of the game, which can only lead to speculation. One of the popular interpretations is that James would go on to adopt Laura, as it's revealed in Mary's letter that she would have adopted Laura if things were different and she wasn't sick. It's presumed that the most logical outcome is that James would honor Mary's wish by adopting Laura. In Your Eyes. Unfortunately, I don't have a clue as to what this entry is referring to when it comes to In Your Eyes. All that came up when searching for this entry was the song Room of Angel from Silent Hill 4's original soundtrack. In the song, there is a lyric that reads, "Here's a lullaby to close your eyes," but that's the closest answer I can come to with this entry. Developer's photo in Historical Society. In Lost Memories, Silent Hill Chronicle, it appears that in one of the photos, seen in Silent Hill Historical Society, is the development staff, Team Silent. Ernest knowing about James. In the sub-scenario for Silent Hill 2, Born from a Wish, the player gets to assume the role of Maria. In Born from a Wish, Maria travels to Baldwin Mansion, where she meets the ghost of Ernest James Baldwin. At some point, Maria needs to collect a white liquid to give to Baldwin to resurrect his deceased daughter. Once Maria gives this to Baldwin, he reveals that a man named James Sunderland is to be avoided as he is a bad man. As to how Baldwin knows about James is left unknown, but it's possible that Baldwin is seen as one of the many manifestations that are brought about the town of Silent Hill, which would explain how it knows about James Sunderland. Silent Hill 4 UFO ending. It's a mystery as to why Silent Hill 4 never got a UFO ending when previous installments did. It can be speculated that due to time constraints during late development refrained the developers from implementing a UFO ending. However, it appears that data mining the game files for Silent Hill 4 reveals unused assets for a scrapped UFO ending. These items in particular are the channeling stone, the dirty stone, the courtyard key, and red oil. Calgar Dinok. In Silent Hill 1, the opening FMV has a frame where Harry and Cheryl are driving to Silent Hill. In this frame, the player can see Cheryl clutching onto her sketchbook, called Drawing Block. It's possible that after completing the main story, in the same opening FMV cutscene, the player can find Cheryl's sketchbook titled Calgar Dinok. It can't be assumed that this is a mistranslation or spelling error that happened at some point in development and went unnoticed by Team Silent. Phone caller voice actor. In Silent Hill 3, there is an optional cutscene in Nightmare Brookhaven Hospital where Heather encounters a telephone call from a mysterious voice. The call that is left is mysterious and unsettling, considering the tone of the voice gives off, which is undoubtedly creepy and I imagine left the player disturbed. It's revealed that the voice actor behind the phone call is Clifford Ripple, the same voice actor who voices Vincent Smith. Mary's murder sound effects. In Silent Hill 2, when James receives the VHS tape and inserts it into the VHS player, it's revealed that James ended up killing his wife, Mary. In this VHS tape, we see frames that are obscured and blurred when James is suffocating his wife with a pillow. The only audio you can hear is the VHS player. Originally, there was a deleted audio recording that was uncovered in the game files. In this audio, you can hear Mary suffocating to death in real time, with muffled screams becoming panicked and slowly subsiding as she passes away. It's very unsettling and upsetting to hear, so if you want to skip this if this is deeply uncomfortable to listen to, please skip to this timestamp. Douglas adopting Heather. During the events of Silent Hill 3, Heather loses her father, Harry Mason. He is killed by one of the monsters, the Missionary, ordered by Claudia as an act of revenge for Harry killing the Incubus in Silent Hill 1. This leaves Heather not only fueled with anger and vengeance to avenge her father, but also leaving her without her only family left. At the end of Silent Hill 3, it's shown that both Heather and Douglas are reunited, safe and sound. It's left ambiguous as to what happens to both Heather and Douglas after the events of Silent Hill 3 as it's never confirmed. However, it can be assumed that Heather would be adopted by Douglas, as I imagine her surviving on her own would be harsh and difficult as she's only 17. Douglas also lost his son years ago and wants to make amends by helping Heather throughout the plot of Silent Hill 3 as a means to avenge his son's death. It would make sense as to why Heather would presumably end up living with Douglas, seeing him as an adopted father figure in her life. Interestingly, Dead by Daylight had a collab with Silent Hill called the Silent Hill Chapter. In this, there is lore that covers the aftermath of Heather Mason and her whereabouts years later after the events of Silent Hill 3, stating that she becomes a volunteer for a crisis center for troubled youth. 3 months later, after studying for training exams, she becomes an official crisis line operator. While the canon is debatable, this is technically a collaboration of Konami, more specifically, Silent Hill. Silent Hill 3 Original Concept. Originally, the plans for Silent Hill 3 were drastically different than the final release of the Silent Hill 3 we ended up getting. When conceptualizing the ideas for Silent Hill 3, Team Silent wanted to incorporate much of the themes from Silent Hill 2 to tell its narrative. However, Konami wasn't pleased with the slow sales for Silent Hill 2 at the time of its release and instead favored a push into making the next installments an arcade-style rail shooter spin-off. Team Silent rejected this pitch by Konami and in trade pushed for a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1, which was decided after much of the reviews for Silent Hill 2 were confused by the sudden story shift from continuing the story from Silent Hill 1. And so, Team Silent opted to continue the storyline and finish the story with the Silent Hill 3 we now have today. Mary's and Harry's wife disease. At some point in their respective lives, Harry Mason and James Sunderland both had happy lives with their wives. Harry's wife is Jodie Mason, and James Sunderland's wife is Mary Shepard Sunderland. At some point in both Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2, it's revealed that their wives would undoubtedly succumb to a disease that left them bedridden and would tragically pass away. Albeit, Mary would die at the hands of James, while Jodie's death would presumably be to natural causes at the hands of her illness. However, it's quite a coincidence that both their wives would end up passing away before the events of their respective stories, especially to a disease that is left unknown. The real Michael G. Michael Gein, a retired voice actor, previously voiced Harry Mason in Silent Hill 1. However, during the credits, he is credited as simply Michael G. This would confuse players as there would happen to be another voice actor in video games who also went by the name Michael G, his full name being Michael Goff. However, when asked by fans if Goff voiced Harry Mason, he denies this. Coins encryptions. This entry can lead to one of two things when it mentions coins encryptions, as Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 4, respectively, have coins as items that are needed to access new areas in their games. Silent Hill 2 has 3 coins: Old Man Coin, Prisoner Coin, and Snake Coin. If you look closely, each respective coin has images on it that represent the coin in question: an image of an old man, an image of a woman, and an image of a snake. It's theorized that the prisoner coin is in relation to Angela, as she is symbolically a prisoner at the hands of her father and brother's abuse. What cements this theory is the reverse side of the coin that shows eggs, implying that the abuse of Angela may have led her to fertility at one point. The coin also happens to appear in the room she is in, when James finds Angela holding the knife close by her, contemplating her existence. In Silent Hill 4, there's an item called $1 coin, which is used to retrieve the murder scene key from a vending machine in the subway world. The encryption of the coin shows a symbol that has a 1 in the middle and a $sign overlaying it. Coincidentally, the survival horror game Ruler Rose happens to also have the same encryption in a bathroom you find at some point during the game. There is no God. I'm a bit at a loss as to what this entry could mean, as I don't have a memory of any mention of "there is no God" being commented by a character in any of the Silent Hill games. But I guess that Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3 have a plot that arrives from the birth of a false god in each respective game, that ends up turning into an imperfect being, resulting in the protagonist having to kill them. These quote-unquote gods were predicted to cleanse the world and give birth to a perfect paradise. The outcome of this is the complete opposite. There is also the fact that many of the Silent Hill protagonists suffer the traumatic event at the expense of a tragedy that haunts them, possibly leading them to believe that there is no god. Johnny burned down the hotel. When exploring the basement of Lakeview Hotel, James can find a break room that was presumably for employees to take breaks during their shifts. In this room, the player can examine the heater that reads, "I'm Johnny, one hot guy," implying that the employee who goes by Johnny either caused the fire or was caught in the fire, as the heater potentially could have malfunctioned and caught the curtain on fire, causing the fire to burn down Lakeview Hotel. Further supporting this incident is in Nightmare Lakeview Hotel, where James can find police tape stating, "Warning, fire," and in Toluca Prison in one of the jail cells that shows a painting depicting Lakeview Hotel burning in fire. Newspaper fires cover-up. The newspaper fire cover-up refers to the Blair incident at the Gillespie household, where Alessa Gillespie's body was found charred after the ritual. A memo that can be found in Silent Hill 1 titled "Newspaper from 7 years ago" reports the same boiler incident that took place at the Gillespie household, stating, Alessa's body was found on the scene. However, this body that was found was a fake, presumably planted to have the public assume Alessa was killed in the fire, when in reality, she was secretly transferred to a basement in Alchemilla Hospital for 7 years, where she was tortured. Sonic Designer was part of Team Silent, the original designer of Sonic the Hedgehog and Dr. Eggman. Naoto Oshima surprisingly would be a part of the development staff for Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3. Naoto would be credited as the original crew, working as a graphic system programmer for Silent Hill 1 and an effect programmer for Silent Hill 3. Lilith. After the opening cutscene with James staring at himself in the mirror, the player can explore the bathroom stalls to see lots of messages that are either gibberish or nonsensical. However, there is this one message on the bathroom wall that seems to have some meaning behind its message. In a Reddit thread 4 years ago back in 2020, a Reddit user, Extra Gloria, deciphered the message on the wall to uncover that the symbol is based on Hebrew writing. According to them, they found the symbol in one of their books called Kabbalah, which depicts the female demon Lilith. On top of the image of Lilith are 3 figures that are called Sanoi, Sanzanoi, and Simanjalov. There was a hole here. In Silent Hill 2, there is a mysterious message found in Ellie's bar that reads, "There was a hole here. It's gone now." For a long time, this message was left in ambiguity, as it was never truly confirmed as to what the message meant, thus leading to lots of fan theories of speculation, analysis, etc. However, Masahiro Ito recalls the origin of the whole message coming from either environment artist Takashi Miura or scenario writer Hiroyuki Owaku. Masahiro Ito speculated that the message could symbolize that James Sunderland no longer has anywhere to hide from himself. Holes are a motif that appear in Silent Hill 2, as James would subsequently have to jump down the holes to descend to Toluca prison, and then once again into the labyrinth. Alessa's sleep cycles. In Silent Hill 1, the town of Silent Hill has sudden changes that happen periodically throughout the gameplay, where it appears to be foggy and then suddenly shifts into night. The cycle tends to repeat itself as normally, in most Silent Hill games, the player will experience the fog world and then the other world unpredictably. In the context of Silent Hill 1, a proper explanation as to why these sudden environmental shifts happen is due to Alessa Gillespie. This is because Alessa's nightmares from her past trauma and tragedies developed into physical manifestations, seen as monsters or, in this context, the town of Silent Hill itself. Angela is sitting across Heather and Happy Burger. In the opening of Silent Hill 3, Heather is seen waking up from a nightmare in the fast food restaurant Happy Burger. It's a very small cutscene that shows Heather gathering her thoughts and collecting herself while she looks out the window, taking out her necklace and remembering she has to get home. What the player doesn't know is that there is another person of Heather during this cutscene. If the player were to hack the camera during this cutscene, you can find a floating head of Angela's character model. It's very weird and odd of a placement, disturbing even, as it's unexplainable as to why this is here. However, the reason why this is here is because Silent Hill 3 reuses assets from Silent Hill 2. Similarly, the character model for Harry Mason in Silent Hill 3 is a reused asset model of James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2. Blaze of Glory. In Silent Hill 2, when James encounters Laura in Lakeview Hotel, he receives Laura's letter. The model for Laura's letter appears to have different text transcribed on the paper as opposed to what the player reads when first received. This text, when translated, is an altered version of the song Blaze of Glory by American singer John Bon Jovi. Minmo. Minmo is an advertisement that you can find in Silent Hill 3 at the subway level. While here, you can find a picture of cat food advertised as a healthy product to feed to your cat, by food manufacturer Minmo Cat Foods. Alessa made the boiler explode. Before the events of Silent Hill 1, it's claimed that the Gillespie household burned down due to a boiler explosion, which in turn caused the fire that produced harmful side effects on Alessa's body, as she was caught in the crossfire, being burnt alive. Because of this, she would be transferred to Alchemilla Hospital, where she lived for 7 years of her life, recovering from her wounds, but also bedridden and kept forcefully from her mother, Dahlia Gillespie. While this is a known fact, there have been fan theories regarding the boiler incident being caused by Alessa herself. It's theorized that the cause of the fire was due to Alessa's intense psychic energy, causing the boiler to explode. On the other side of the coin, fans claim that this is false, as this is contradicted by the official guidebook and the Lost Memories Silent Hill Chronicle. These sources state that the cause of the boiler incident was due to the ritual itself which produced the fire, Maria's birth in the intro. I am not sure as to what this entry is referring to when it comes to Maria's birth in the intro of Silent Hill 2, but if I were to guess, I'm assuming it's referring to the scene here, where Maria is lying on her side in Heaven's Night, as the exact moment when she was born. There's also Born from a Wish, which gives a prologue to the main story, Letter from Silent Heaven. This could also allude to Maria being birthed by the town of Silent Hill itself, wished subconsciously from James himself as a reincarnation of Mary. Halo of the Sun Runes. The Halo of the Sun is a recurring symbol that is usually associated with the religious cult, the Order. The symbol is more cryptic and complex as it contains many details in the inner and outer circles. The most notable aspects are the runes itself. These runes at first glance are hard to determine what they symbolize, but in reality, many of these runes are correlated with the natural elements that constitute an important foundation in cosmology. The Order's three main elements are rust, blood, and light. But the main idea behind the Halo of the Sun is to be a symbol of worship when it comes to representing the Order's depiction of their idea of God. Gonna Beach in the Sea. In Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3, when in Brookhaven Hospital at the reception office, the player can find a poster with a red cross at the top, with a message underneath that reads, Gonna Beach in the Sea. This is most likely a grammar and misspelling error on the developer's part that the fandom made into a joke amongst each other, trying to decipher the meaning behind the message. Tom He Lets Lies. Tom Hewlett is a former employee of Konami who worked as an associate producer for Silent Hill Origins, producer for Silent Hill Shadow Memories, and Silent Hill Downpour, along with various other Western Silent Hill games before leaving in 2013. During his time at Konami, Tom Hewlett was seen as the role of the main director of the Silent Hill franchise. Because of this, lots of fans at the time blamed Tom Hewlett for the outcome of the later installments post-Team Silent, to the extent to which he received death threats from certain fans and overall toxic verbal abuse. In reality, much of Tom's role was limited due to Konami. At the end of the day, Konami had the final word on the matter at hand. Tom Hewlett states this on a Ask Me Anything on Reddit back in 2016. Of course, it was daunting stepping up to the franchise. Be aware, I was never the man in charge of Silent Hill, as I've explained above. Whether I was assisting or producing, I did my best to be an advocate in the interest of the Silent Hill series and its fans. This did not mean ask what the fans want and do that, but make decisions I felt fans would especially enjoy, or would enhance their experience with Silent Hill. Real-world dog-killing audio file. As disturbing and unsettling as this entry is, I couldn't find anything relating to a real-world dog-killing audio file regarding any of the Silent Hill games that could have potentially used such audio. I'm assuming that one of the Silent Hill games that do contain dogs as enemies could refer to their death sound effect being reused audio of an actual dog dying, but this sounds like speculation as I couldn't find any proof of evidence. Stephen Street. As far as I'm aware, Stephen Street is not a street in Silent Hill. If we take a look at the maps, they seem to not contain any mention of Stephen Street. However, if this entry is referring to Stephen King, the American novelist, then there are a couple of references to him throughout the game, such as the red rum seen on the garage door. Pyramid Head blinks. After some research, I couldn't find any information regarding Pyramid Head blinking. The only information that I gathered was from the Dead by Daylight subreddit. Supposedly, Pyramid Head can actually get stunned by a flash in-game which temporarily blinds him. With this in mind, this led to questions about the logic behind Pyramid Head, as he has a pyramid-shaped helmet over his head. Kaufman has been forging autopsies. Michael Kaufman, the director of Alchemilla Hospital, is closely associated with the Order and is speculated to forge autopsies, specifically the death of Alessa after the Boiler incident. Because of Kaufman's association with distributing illegal drugs, blackmailing Lisa Garland, and being an accomplice in Alessa's torture, he is more than willing to forge her autopsy report when it comes to faking her death. Closer is a mall cop. This is quite an odd entry as I couldn't find any mention of the Closer being a mall cop, but I'm assuming at some point, fans speculated that the symbolism behind the Closer is that of a mall cop, possibly because the Closer is active throughout the Central Square shopping center and happens to patrol the premises, much like a mall cop would do. This also could be more likely an inside joke from the community and not to be taken seriously. Angela's hearing aid. A very obscure detail that is not widely known is that Angela has a hidden texture on her left ear. It's assumed that this could be a hearing aid as it may look similar to that of one, but in reality, it's most likely a hairpin to hold her hair back. Alessa's impregnation. It's known that the ritual Alessa's mother performed, Dahlia Gillespie, was to impregnate her daughter with a god, so Alessa could give birth to a god that would cleanse the earth and reborn the world without pain or suffering. However, this entry seems to imply that Alessa's impregnation has a darker and sinister turn, as it could be misinterpreted that Alessa was assaulted physically and forcefully. However, this isn't the case, as Alessa was able to have this god impregnated inside of her because of her psychic powers that allow this ritual to be successful. Store name changes. In pre-release screenshots for Silent Hill 2, there were images of a street named Old Nelly Street. Initially, the buildings and store names were different in the beta build in comparison to the final release. This street was ultimately scrapped and altered to be changed to the Nelly Street we see in the final release. However, one can question as to why this change happened. One of the realistic answers is that the store buildings and names were changed due to the similarities being based on a real-life street in San Bruno, California. With using actual stores comes legality issues, as Konami would have to make agreements with San Bruno City Council for image appropriation. Miriam K equals Miriam Locane. In Silent Hill 2, before the boss fight with Eddie, James finds himself in a graveyard. In this graveyard, you can find a gravestone that reads Miriam K, Traitor. It's up to interpretation as to who Miriam K could be, as this person is never once mentioned anywhere else. However, it's speculated that Miriam K is Miriam Locane, the unfortunate victim alongside her twin brother, who were murdered by Walter Sullivan. You can find this in a newspaper in a dumpster at Woodstead Apartments. As to why her initials are Miriam K and not Miriam M, is possibly due to a translation error. Hometown is the story of the "there was a hole here" guy. In the Silent Hill 3 soundtrack called Hometown, a rendition of the Silent Hill theme from Silent Hill 1 is possibly connected to "there was a hole here" message. I'm assuming that somewhere in the lyrics there is a mention of holes and that possibly being correlated to James Sunderland. However, I don't see any mention of this. Valtiel equals Saint Nicholas. It's theorized that Valtiel is connected to Saint Nicholas. Both are descendants of their god, who they serve to worship and pay loyalty to. Valtiel observes hither to ensure the birth of God. However, this connection between the two isn't confirmed to be true. First coming during Civil War. According to Silent Hill history, in 1861, the American Civil War broke out, influencing the development of Silent Hill for the duration of the conflict. This led to a prison camp converted into Toluca Prison after the Civil War. Native Americans ended organized resistance, and people all over Silent Hill started to disappear. This could be the catalyst for the events we see in the mainline installments that unravel. Sulfuric acid torture. There is a theory that the torture that Alessa experienced was also attributed to the use of sulfuric acid, a contribution to the burning of Alessa's skin. The purpose of this sulfuric acid was to weaken Alessa by preventing the barrier between herself and her other half, Cheryl Mason, from reconnecting and returning to one another. If the souls of Alessa and Cheryl are recombined, this will lead to the birth of God. However, I don't see any mention of the sulfuric acid being used as a torture method. Frank Sunderland is Walter's father. In Silent Hill 4, if the player were to read Frank Sunderland's diary, it's discovered that before the events of Silent Hill 4, he discovered a baby in room 302 and gave him to the nearby St. Jerome's Hospital. This baby would be Walter Sullivan, the main antagonist in Silent Hill 4. Frank suspected that the baby's parents may have had financial troubles or had gotten themselves into danger. Because of this, he kept the baby's umbilical cord in his room for over 34 years because he felt that it was too precious to throw out. As to how Frank would be connected to Walter as his father, whether biological or adopted, is beyond me. But I suppose if you look at it from a perspective where Frank keeping the umbilical cord is in a poetic and wholesome way, keeping an essence of Walter Sullivan with him, that being his innocence, fathering the umbilical cord, if you will. And that is the Silent Hill Iceberg explained.